Dear Lord, thank you for the day. Lord, thank you for the blessings you've given us. Thank you for Carly, Lord. Just pray you may help her, Lord, in her classes as she tries to get caught up and continue. It's tough being the only one in class for her as well as probably for the teachers as well. I just pray maybe the ones that are distance learning, Lord, help them to stay focused, help them to stay caught up and not to get behind, Lord. Just guide and lead in everything we do. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so do you have any questions on completing the square? Okay, so we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. Your quiz that was scheduled for tomorrow is going to be on Math Excel. So you won't have it in class, it will actually be on Math Excel that you do at home. Okay, so that's for all those that are distance learning, your quiz is on Math Excel as well. So we want to talk about quadratic formula. We learned how to factor or solve by factoring. We learned how to solve by completing the square. Today we want to learn how to solve by quadratic formula. So we want to look at the formula that we want to solve by. We get ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So if we were going to solve this by completing the square, we would take the c to the other side, because we got to isolate. We got to get rid of the a, because we want the coefficient of the x squared to be 1. So we divide by a. And now we can complete the square, which will take the linear term coefficient, b over a, divide by 2, which is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2, which equals b over 2a, and then we square it, which is b squared over 4a squared, and we add to both sides. The rule is to factor, so we had a perfect square trinomial, square root, sign in the middle, square. Simplify, c over a is the same thing as 4ac over 4a squared. We're going to multiply the top and the bottom by 4a, so we get b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. To take the square root of both sides, the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of a squared is a. That's the plus and minus, always. And we're going to take the x over, or the b over 2a over. This is the quadratic formula. That's what you want to memorize. You don't have to know how to do this, but I just wanted to show you how they developed that formula. But you do need to memorize this. Negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And we developed that by using quadratic form, completing the square. So the key is, our equation must always be in general form. We always know what our a is in front of the x squared. We always know what our b is in front of the x. We always know what our c is that's in front of that's by itself. So let's look at x squared minus 6x plus 8 equals 0. All right, so I'm going to show all three methods. Solve it by factoring. Factors of 8 that will add up to equal 6. 4 and 2. This is plus, and this is the minus. Both sides on the side are minus and plus. So x equals, so my zeros are and 2. Remember, it's always opposite. So there's our zeros, 4 and 2. Well, this is how we would do it if we were completing the square. Take the 8 to the other side. We take the middle term, the 6, divide by 2, which is 3, square it, which is 9, and add to both sides. Factor the left. Simplify the right. Square to both sides. Square to 1 is 1, plus or minus 1, and with a 3 over. Which equals 4 and 2. So same thing, same zeros. If we're using the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, here's my b, negative 6. Opposite of b is 6, plus or minus. B squared, so negative 6 squared, 36. Minus 4 times a, my a is 1. C, my c is 8. Over 2 times 1. We simplify. 36 minus 32 over 2. 6 plus or minus square root 4 over 2. Square root 4 is 2. 6 plus or minus 2 over 2. 6 plus 2 is 8. Divide by 2 is 4. 6 minus 2 is 4. Divide by 2 is 2. So again, 4 and 2 are my zeros. So we see each method gets the same answer. There is an occasion to use each method. The easiest way, factoring, if you do factoring first. Next easiest is quadratic formula. And probably the more complicated is the completing the square. But there's a place and time for completing the square, which we'll see today as well. So, let's look at let's go 2x squared plus 7x minus 15 equals 0. So we're going to solve this by quadratic formula. So again, every time you use quadratic formula, write it down first. Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Even on your homework, on your tests, or your quizzes, always write the formula down. What's my b? 7, so it's minus 7, plus or minus. B squared, 7 squared? 49. Minus 4. What's my a? 2. And my c? Oh, over 2 times my a again? 2. Now we simplify. 7 plus or minus 49. 2 times 2, let's do it this way. 2 times 15 times 4. Over 4. Negative 7 plus or minus 49 plus 120. Correct? Over 4. Square root of 169. Remember that one? It's going to be 13. now we got negative 7 plus 13. Divide by 4.
3 over 2.
Very good. And negative 7 minus 13. Divide by 4.
Negative 5.
Very good. So there are my zeros. So the big thing about quadratic formula is remember your formula and make sure we are in standard form. Make sure move everything to the one side to get my A, B, and C. So far so good? Alright, so when we look at parabolas, because quadratic formulas are my parabolas, I got three ways that this could happen. We got a parabola here, we got a parabola here, or we have a parabola here. Alright, so three different ways my parabola could be on my graph. Well, here I have two zeros, two answers. So that would be like this. I get 4 and 2. Those are the places where it crosses the x-axis. My solutions are also called roots, that are also called x-intercepts, which are also called zeros. Called zeros because these are the points that will make this equation 0. Called roots because those are the roots of my equation. X-intercepts because they cross at the x-axis. And we're going to talk about zero solutions are my answers. Here we have 1 point, we have one answer. And here we have no real solutions. Here we have one real solution. And here we have two real solutions. We can tell which ones we're going to have by looking at our quadratic formula. The part that says b squared minus 4ac. This is called the discriminant. B squared minus 4ac. Not the square root, but just b squared minus 4ac. If this is equal to 0, we have one real solution. So if I find my b and multiply and subtract 4ac and it comes out to be 0, one real solution. If this comes out to be greater than 0, that means I have a positive number. I have two real solutions. If this comes out to be less than 0, I have two, we call it too complex, or no real solutions. Depends on how they ask you to do that. Yeah, no real solutions is fine. We haven't really talked about imaginary numbers yet. So one real, two real, or no real. So let's look at an example. Two real intersects twice, one real intersects once, and no real does not intersect the x-axis. So let's look at x plus 2 minus equals negative 3x squared. Alright, so we want to find the nature of the solutions. That's what they'll ask us. What is the solutions going to be? Are they going to be one real, two real, or no real? So we want to use my discriminant. I need to put this in the correct form. Alright, everything should be one side. And I'm going to use b squared minus 4ac. Well, my b squared, my b is what? So it's the number in front of my x, which is 1. 1 squared, which is 1. Minus 4 times my a, which is 3, times my 2. So I get 1 minus 24. And 1 minus 24 would be negative 23. This is my discriminant. Because I'll ask you, what is my discriminant? The discriminant is negative 23. What is the nature? If it's negative, it's less than 0, so I have no real solutions. And I may ask, okay, where's my graph? My graph does not intersect. Because I'm looking like this. Okay? Let's look at another one. 12x times x plus 1. Equals negative 3. Alright? Again, I want to get in this form, so I'll have to distribute 12x times x, 12x squared, 12x times 1 plus 12x, and bring the 3 over, plus 3 equals 0. Alright, so I want to find the nature of my solutions. So I have b squared minus 4ac. Well, what's my b?
12.
So 12 squared. 4 times my a. 12 times my c. So 12 squared is?
144.
And 4 times 3 is 12, so 12 times 12 is? Which equals 0. Alright, so what's my discriminant? Well, this is 0. Correct, so that's my discriminant. And what's the nature of my solutions? One real. And or one real solution. And where is the graph? Alright, intersects once. So that is discriminant. So what do you think? Good? Okay? Alright, so we need to do one other thing when we talked about completing the square. So let's go back a little bit. So 3x squared minus 6x plus 5. Now remember, this is a parabola. We can put it in vertex form. Our vertex form is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And we learned that we could find our h by doing what? B over 2a. We can find my k by doing what? my h was negative b, which is
6.
over 2 times a, which is
3 times 2, which is 6.
that equals 1. So my h is 1. My k equals my c, which is
5.
minus a, which is
3.
times h squared, which is 1. So that's going to be 5 minus,
5 minus 3.
which is 2. So I can put it in vertex form, which is y equals, what's my a?
3.
3 times x minus my h is
1.
1 squared plus
2.
2. Vertex form. So that's using the h and the k. I want to show us how to do it using completing the square. Alright, so the first step. Separate the quadratic and the linear term. And we do that by parentheses. Alright? So separate quadratic and linear with parentheses. Alright? Step 2. Get coefficient to be 1 by factoring. So here, greatest common factor here is 3. So I'm going to take out the 3. So here I want to complete the square inside the parentheses. To complete the square, linear term, 2, divide by 2, which is 1, square it, which is 1, and then add it. Alright, so what we're going to do here is a little bit different because before we would say that we add it to both sides. But we're not going to add it to both sides here. We're going to stay on one side. So it's sort of like a teeter-totter. So if I have an equation, I have a teeter-totter that's balanced, 5 on each side. And I decide to add 2 to one side. So now my teeter-totter is like this, correct? Well, I want to keep it balanced. So usually I could add 2 on the other side and it would balance it up, but I don't want to worry about the other side. I'm not going to touch the other side. I just want to do on this side. So what will I do? Take 2 away. Okay, so this is my parentheses. This is outside my parentheses. So here, when I look at this, I put 1 here, but with the 3 on the outside, what did I actually add? If I would do the distributive property, I actually added what? 3. So I want to do the opposite on the outside. So I want to take away 3. So I have just now balanced my seesaw again. Now I simplify. Factor, Square root of the first term is x. Square root of the second term is 1, minus sign. And 5 minus 3 is 2. Vertex form, which is what we did, there we go, right there. Same thing. Change it to vertex form using completing the square. Let's do one more. Alright, so here we got y equals 4x squared minus 10x minus 3. First step, separate. Okay? Second step, get rid of the coefficient. So what we're going to do, we're going to take it out. We're going to divide. So with a 10 over 4, I want to simplify that. 10 over 4 is the same thing as now I want to complete the square. Take the middle term, 5 halves, divide by 2, which is the same thing as multiplying by 1 half, which is and then correct, square it, 25 fourths. Alright, when I put 25 fourths in here, what did I actually add in there with the 4 being on the outside? But if you think of it this way, it's going to be 4 times 25 over 4, or 4 over 1. What happens to the 4s? They cancel each other out, so I'm left with. So I actually added 25 on the inside. So what do I want to do on the outside? Subtract 25, correct. So I got 4. Change this to binomial squared, square root of the first term, square root of the third term, minus sign in between, and simplify. 8. Alright, so change it to vertex form by completing the square. Okay? So you got plenty of examples there. Alright, so we're going to stop there. What I want you to do tonight is just using quadratic formula. You are on page 245. And we are doing numbers 11 through 65, every other odd. And then Math Excel 4.6. Now I don't want you to do Math Excel. No Math Excel tonight. So we're just doing this. Page 245, 11 through 65, every other odd. So if we look at our book, solved using quadratic formula on page 245. So if you can turn to page 245 real quick. Alright, the first section, 11 through 22, you're solving the quadratic formula using the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, and getting 2 answers, or 1 answer. 25 through 36, you're just looking for the discriminant. That's just the b squared minus 4ac. Okay? Flip over to the page. 41 to 55, you're using the quadratic formula. Or you can use factoring, or you can use completing the square, whichever way you want to do it. And they want you to round off to the nearest hundredths place, so you use your calculator to round off to the nearest hundredths place. 58 through 66, they're asking how many x-intercepts. So that's using discriminant. All right, you either have two real solutions, that's two x-intercepts, one real solution, that's one x-intercept, or no real solution, that's zero x-intercepts. So you're just using the discriminant there. Okay, so that's what you're doing on those there. Make sense? Okay, very good.